I didn't think they were going to get this pissed off.
Just shut up and keep driving.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inforunners Podcast Episode 2. And today, we're going to tell you why you should sell your fighters. You heard me, sell your fighters. This is Dasein was here.
And this is Hayes.
So today, we're going to be actually discussing this topic that kind of came up during a conversation that we were having when we were looking at some of the different ships to invest in.
Is the idea that they've been telling us repeatedly that the cost of ships of what we're paying now is discounted compared to the real UEC value in the game. Ships will be based on the itemized components of the ship themselves and what it costs to make them. Ships that are smaller in size, sort of like discounted around 4 times. And they've sold this idea, Chris Roberts and Ben Lesnick, a couple of times, that larger ships would be discounted up to as much as 12 times. So this sort of disconnect about if you're going to invest your money, that you get a greater bang for your buck out of your investment by if you've already spent over a certain amount in the higher end.
Yes, and Chris Roberts even talked about in a more recent video about the idea of how, like, you buy a handgun versus buying a car. The difference in cost there than a car to a jet, and then from a jet to an aircraft carrier. There's major exponential differences in the scale and cost. So let's take a look at a real-life example here. You have let's take a top-of-the-line fighter, your F-22 Raptor. You're looking at around $150 million. And then you go in and you look at some cargo jets. Let's take a Boeing 747. You're looking at $238 million. So you might say, well, those are two completely different things in real life. Well, let's take a look in Star Citizen at something that's kind of going to be your comparison. Let's say instead of F-22 Raptor, we're talking Vanguard. And instead of a cargo vessel right there, you're going to be looking at something like a Constellation Andromeda. They're on the same basic tier of pricing, yet just look at the component difference right there.
Well, they're completely different ships. One's like 2 to 3 times the size in null mass. The amount of different components is huge. To manufacture a ship like Andromeda compared to a Vanguard should be a significant level higher. But you can go further than that. It's more than likely that a Constellation Andromeda is more able to earn money. It's got more multi-role capacity to do different sorts of missions, whether it be escorting, cargo, exploration. It could do salvage. You buy a Vanguard and you're stuck to just a couple of very small, select military roles. The other thing is the Vanguard has those bucks, the battlefield upgrade kits you can attach. And if you were to get all of them, the Sentinel and the Harbinger base modules, you're already up for a bill of $320. I mean, well, why not just go up to $350 and buy a proper capital ship? You get yourself a Carrack or a Claimer, or perhaps an Orion's only another $5.
And just look at that. Look at the component cost in going into those ships. Holy mackerel, are you now getting a way better value for what you'd have to pay to get them.
And the other idea is if you get a large industry ship, you can use that to offset and attempt to earn those smaller ships. If you want a Hornet, well, you can get the Hornet that much faster in-game with a larger capital ship, and it might only take you a week or 2 to actually earn it. Same with the Vanguard. It might take you a week, 2 or 3 in order to earn it. But if you reverse that around and start with the Vanguard, how many months is it going to take before you earn your Reclaimer or your Orion?
It's going to take you a lot longer to do that. And let's take a look at a scenario that you might have an average Joe. Wants to do a little bit of mining, so they're going to have a prospector. And now you have someone that's wanting a Super Hornet so they can do a little bit of combat. Great. Their in-game goal is going to be the Orion. How long do you think it's going to be for them to earn that in-game versus doing it the other way around, having the Orion and trying to earn your Super Hornet, and then if they feel like it, so they can do some planetary mining, want to get a prospector?
Well, so the idea is that if you have several smaller ships, and you've already spent up to several $100s worth, you'd be better served by consolidating those smaller purchases and obtaining one larger ship and perhaps one smaller ship to get you by. And even after you've sort of invested in a large capital, let's say it's your only ship, and you say, well, where's my end game? I have everything I want. There's nothing left for me to do. Well, that's not necessarily the case. It's been often said that you can invest just as much in upgrades in UEC as it was to actually buy the base ships. You're just getting yourself into top gear faster, but you have a long way to go to getting down the end of the road to where you want to be.
Well, and on the flip side of that, you also look at the other argument that people make, well, the larger ships are going to have larger operating costs. Well, that's going to be true, but think about it this way. You're going to be able to make probably exponentially more profits that really do make that a very small thing. The only time that's a big issue is if you have a failed mission. Keep in mind, if you're earning that much more, you'll probably be able to afford some of the smaller ships to either offset a failed mission operating costs so you can work with them for a little while, or use those smaller ships for some of the more versatile or different roles.
And now we can start talking about the pointy end of the larger capital ships. When you start getting into territory like the Idris, like the Javelin, and the Polaris, or even the Hull E. They've often said that the Idris alone, as well as the Javelin, are so heavily discounted that they then go on to one of those awkward silences and say, yeah, we don't really know how much UEC it's going to cost, or I'm not really going to say. But they've always pointed on the idea that these ships are so heavily discounted, it may even be larger than 12 times the actual value of what you're paying. And another interesting comparison you can do directly with a Hull D is, well, look at a Hull D and now compare it to a Hull E. A Hull E is 3.5 times the null cargo mass, the actual weight and mass of the ship, compared to the Hull D. It's going to cost 3.5 times to manufacture and make this ship. But when you look at the prices, the Hull E is only 50% more expensive than a Hull D. If you were to apply the same discounting method that you got for the price for the Hull D and bring it out to where the Hull E should be, it would be $1,000 ship.
And think about it this way also. Take a look at your weekend warrior, the person that's only going to be spending maybe 2 to 4 hours a week at this game. They really like it. It's going to take them a long time to get those in-game goals, but if they actually went in and consolidated everything that they have into one ship instead of 5 ships, they're going to be able to get those 5 ships back and be able to have a lot more fun at the end game with the limited time than spending years to get to that one in-game goal.
We're not saying that buying small fighters or ships is a bad investment per se by itself. It's more that if you have multiples of this and your pledge level is already sub $300, perhaps you could reconsider how you spend your pledge dollars so that you could better target and set yourself up for that end game and then perhaps earn those smaller ships later in the game.
And really, our final argument for this really goes down to looking at the Banu Merchantman compared to the Vanguard Warden, the Redeemer, and the Constellation Andromeda, all on that same basic level and tier of pricing. You look at that and you go, holy mackerel, this ship literally outdoes all of those.
Yeah, that's pretty unfair of a comparison, but let's go with it. The Banu Merchantman. Here we've got a 100-meter industry-specific ship that should have stats and cargo capacity in the $350 range. For whatever reason they decided it didn't have an alien tax in by that time. And you're comparing the Vanguard Warden, the Redeemer, and the Constellation Andromeda? It's not really much of a competition, is it?
It really isn't. And when you look at some of these different ships, either you have the Banu and the Constellation, which can fit multiple roles, everything from just pure cargo to being able to go in and actually be an escort for a convoy, to 2 ships that are very specific in what they're going to do.
It's just the sheer size of it. I mean, how many Banu MMs in exotic sort of alien mechanics would it take to make in comparison to the Vanguard Warden? It blows my mind how much more expensive it would be to put together a Banu merchantman just in the components compared to a Vanguard or a Redeemer. I can see this ship being so much more expensive to get in game. And so, like, for all those Soul Vanguard and Redeemer owners out there, why don't you have a Banu merchantman? If you don't have one and they sell it between now and whenever it gets released, and it was, I think, 3.3, maybe 3.4, you should jump on that. Jump on it fast.
And for those of you who are still in Warrens and Redeemers, why aren't you even looking at the Andromeda, being as that still doesn't give you a lot more versatility and a lot easier way to actually earn money than pigeonholing yourself into a very specific role if that's all you got. This is just our advice, guys. I know this is very controversial here.
Take it with a grain of salt, people. I mean, we're not saying these are bad investments for text fighters, but, you know, it gets to a point where perhaps your dollars would be better served in the longer run if you put it somewhere else. And perhaps then focused on getting your little baby ship that you love and adore just a little bit later. If you have any comments and suggestions, we'd love to hear the feedback. Please put them down in the box below.
And guys, please remember to like and subscribe to this video. And as always,
see you in the verse.